Everyone, welcome to our committee of the whole, where we support community through quality public service. I'll call the meeting to order at 10:31. So on our agenda, we have the minutes of the March meeting, and then we'll go right into some of the different topics that we have to discuss today, starting off with Robbie and the road jurisdiction discussion to be continued.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. So if you guys all remember last time a month ago, we were talking about, potentially some additions, some subtractions to our road system. After our discussion, we really kind of left off, the additions was, we kind of got the A-OK to reach out to the Forest Service there. So an update on that one is I did. They got back to me and said they thought it would be like a 6 to 12 month process. They have to go through a NEPA review and a historical review on their roads. They also want to do a centerline survey of their roads and then, collect all, right-of-way information, that type of stuff. So 6 months to a year on that one. So that's kind of where that sits. That doesn't finalize anything. That just gets us the next step. So there's still plenty of discussion for that, but, we're kind of moving in the, yep, we'll do it category. So. But it seemed like we had far more discussion on removals. And so if you look at the map, you'll see the map looks pretty darn familiar. One road we took off after some field trips was actually Hanson Hempstead. I know Commissioner Storley had brought that up as a concern, and we went and did a field trip, or Matt went out with some of our staff in a field trip, and you'll see that under the road condition column, you can see some notes there about the type of road. After we looked at it, we just didn't think at this point in time, we're not going to talk about that one yet.
I just, to add to that, Hanson Hempstead probably represents what, and I hate to use this term, but like kind of a tier 2. So these are tier 1, meaning like driveways.
Yeah.
But tier 2 is, there's actually a more significant number of residences, and there's also a higher average daily traffic. So that's the reason why that one got removed. It's like if you started to talk about removing that road, you'd be opening up a whole can of worms in terms of other roads that fit that category.
Good point. Very good point. So the second handout you'll see, and thank you to Neva too for providing a lot of context last time, and also for this, is each of the roads, from the map on the first page you'll see, and you can see information specifically on each one. Some of the things that we had talked about was, how much does it cost on each road, including labor, how much does it cost just materials, homesteads, non-homesteads. Matt did a great job going through the filing cabinets and pulling out any historical notes we could find. Like I had mentioned, we had taken some staff out for a field trip to see kind of what do these roads look like. As you'll notice, a lot of them are very narrow, overgrown, grass in the middle of the road. Put road in quotes now, because these are driveways. And then you can see some additional notes that I'm not going to say one thing about, but land use notes and zoning setback changes that Neva will be able to speak to. If you look on the back of the big sheet, there's also some more information. You can see the different setback requirements, and then some additional notes that we included. And I think kind of the highlighted one there will be a big one. Maybe we would need Gene's input for some of that, is what happens to these roads. How are they officially, quote unquote, designated if we were to vacate them or abandon them. So it's kind of a lot to digest, but I didn't know if any thoughts since the last time we had discussed this. Any questions? Neva, do you want to add anything maybe? Or?
Sure. On the far right 2 columns for each of these roads, I gave a summary of what the zoning is, because the zone district is what outlines the structure setbacks from different road designation types. So in certain zone districts, it will say a different setback from a county road versus what we call other private or public roads. So that is kind of the first off is the zone districts that are affected for the properties. And then the very last column is kind of my very general statement of whether or not this would affect the zoning impact with those setbacks. So yes, there are different setbacks for the FAR3 zone district. And then I gave you that table on that backside to show the exact, not all zone districts have different setbacks from a county road or what we call other public or private road. So like the single-family residential zone district, that's the zone district that's usually along the Lake Superior Highway 61 corridor, that has the exact same setback. So it wouldn't have any changes for those. But the change, I didn't specifically say no change because that's where I put maybe, and I'm calling it the big zoning question as to whether or not we're considering these private roads or if we're considering them shared driveways, because our zoning is very not clear about that. So that's kind of the consideration that would need to be figured out to determine whether or not there would be a difference with those.
I want to just give a little bit of historical context to a lot of these. You'll notice under year established, a number of them were established as county roads in the 1960s, early 60s. There seems to be I don't know the full story, but there seems to have been a push, either that or a very accepting board for adding roads onto the system in the 60s. And then consequently, there's also a push at one point to vacate a number of these, and none of them appear to have been successful. And I can't, probably didn't do a full investigation, but I couldn't determine why those had failed. So I don't know the full story there, but again, additions in the 60s, and then various times, either requests from property owners to vacate roads, making life easier for them for various reasons, or from the highway department, on the highway department side, trying to vacate them. So
Let's just watch the videos.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Where are those archives?
It might have to do with who was serving as commissioner at the time that the roads were introduced and at the time that they were attempted to be out. Given my experience in other communities, what got attention, what didn't get attention. But first off, I'd like to say that I really appreciate the work that went into this. This is a lot of scrambling to provide this, and so I really appreciate that. Interesting, any take on why Charlie Lane has as much traffic as it has? You say you don't really necessarily know. But
You don't, and that's what's hard, and I think it gets into how those values are calculated. And so whether you've seen them or not, you see a tube across the road. And so what that is, if you ever see that, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you just think of a garden hose across the road, yeah. So that's what MnDOT uses to do traffic counts. And so they don't, and obviously they don't leave them out all year. And so you get into two different things now. You have an ADT, which is average daily traffic, and that's what they're calculating with the tube. They'll leave it up for a couple of weeks, and they'll say, all right, over 2 weeks, we counted 1,000 vehicles. Great. What that gets turned into then is this AADT. And so that smooths it out over the year to say, okay, you had 1,000 vehicles a day in July, but in December, I bet you it's not that, especially up here. And so there's different seasonal factors that get plugged into that, and so that's where that AADT comes from, is that. So it tries to smooth out those numbers over the year to say, well, typically how much traffic are you getting? As far as why that one is so high, they could have been hauling a lot, I'm not sure. Maybe something got fussy with the conversion in there, but what's nice is when we look at this, and I've done it on other projects, is when you can get into a road-specific thing or a project specifically, and we can say, okay, I think that's too high. I can do my own investigation and say, well, 35 is ridiculous. There's one person that lives down there. Like, no. And I can provide that to the state, and then we can modify it. And so it's just, we don't do any projects on Charlie Lane. So, but I've done it on, we did a bridge replacement up on Cross River there towards the end of the Gunflint. That we modified because that traffic count, it just, looking at it, seemed high. Then once we start counting, okay, there's a resort, there's 10 cabins. And then you start saying, all right, it's seasonal, start, assuming trips and whatever, and that knocks it down a bit. So that's my best guess with that one.
you had, I'm sure when you brought this to us initially, had indicated the basis under which you chose to review this. So when you look at it from your standpoint, which can either be a cost analysis, it can be workload analysis, and from the planning and zoning, the land use analysis, when you look at it in the context of all of that, then it informs your recommendation to the board, which basically at this point is saying, here's what we've looked at, and our assessment is based upon costs, managing costs, and looking whether those costs and return on investment is warranted based on these. So you're coming to us with a recommendation, these are the roads that should be abandoned, and you've looked at it from your standpoint, and you don't see any problems there. You're just showing us the context, and it's not something, at least this analysis, that says, oh my goodness, that wouldn't be good because we anticipate significant development here.
I could say from a zoning perspective, none of these proposals would result in a more restrictive setback. That is to say, nobody, if we took it off being a public road, or non-county road at least, nobody would then have their land say, you need to have your structure further away from the road. And that's what we're always kind of watching out with zoning changes, is we're doing something that's more restrictive than what people used to have to deal with. If anything, everything's gonna get a little bit more lenient, which makes sense. If we're having grass in the middle of the road, there's no reason to be 85 feet from the center line. And we sympathize with people when our rules don't make a lot of sense like that. So it's nice to get that fixed so that our setbacks are relative to that location. You know, good, bad, or otherwise, we got to kind of figure out that big zoning question side of things. And I did kind of make a note on my table on the back of Stonegate Road is kind of the one thing that stood out to me as far as an outlier compared to these other ones, just that it does access a lot of parcels. Maybe not in the, you know, this homestead, non-homestead number only adds up to 11, but when I looked at it on the map, I was like, there's a lot of development or potential development on that road. So that's an observation. I'm not making a qualifying statement as to if that's good or bad or otherwise, but that's one that, like, if we just called it a private drive, I think we're going to be hearing something from the community members about, okay, well, what's the next thing to do with this? So.
And the one thing we don't have is an opinion from our attorney?
Not on exactly what happens to these, correct. We don't know that yet.
Okay.
And so I have a rough idea of what happens, but I think there's some, I think to Neva's point of, is it a shared driveway or a private road? That I don't know. I don't know how that gets figured out.
Yeah, and Stonegate Road to me seems pretty clear that it should be a private road, just with the number of parcels that it's accessing. The ones that are just going up to, you know, one parcel, like, yeah, that makes sense. It'd just be a driveway. Our subdivision ordinance does define, I think it's private road as being 4 or more parcels being accessed off of it. But the application of that definition is always kind of a moving target with existing development, potential development.
And so for what it's worth, Stonegate we added on there since most of it's private already. So we plow the first, what does it say on here? 0.4 miles of it. And so that's where, you know, looking at kind of homesteads and non-homesteads, you're trying to guess where everybody's driveway is on there. So I might be off a property or two on that, I'll admit that. But the majority, you know, the rest of it's all private, and so that's for us, it just looked like one of those, well, if 90% of this road is already private, why are we doing this chunk?
I didn't understand. I missed that
No,
point.
that's okay.
It's
Yeah,
less of an
that's why we're here.
outlier now
Yeah.
to me. Now it makes more sense.
Yeah.
And the process for reintroducing them is not encumbered by statute or ordinance. So in other words, let's say our best estimate based upon the analysis at this point is this is the recommendation that'll come before the board. And if in fact circumstances change, the process for reintroducing is not encumbered by anything that would prohibit us from doing it.
That's a good question. I don't know, you know, you figure the process we're going through with Forest Service roads right now, right? We're talking to them, and so there's a process there. As far as taking over like a private road, right, or a driveway, you know, I think to like Birch Drive or some of those other ones where there was, and at one point you had found a whole checklist from, I think, the 60s.
Well, and then Brandon Lane Standard is.
Brandon Lane Standard, right, of people just petition and then we see that petition. I think the general process was we would used to see a petition, then there'd be a letter from our department, and then it would come to the board, and then you'd like, yep, great, and then, you know, we would create a road description, a survey for it, and then give it a number, and here we go. So I believe that's how it's been done in the past.
And in some cases, you have such roads where that neighborhood basically is contracted to have that handled, and then they get to the point where they just say, let's petition the county and see if they'll just take it over.
It seems to be how it's
Yeah.
been, right,
Yeah.
correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the concerns I have is regarding Skyport Lane, and that involves the fact that part of Skyport Lane goes across airport property. And we're in the process of a master plan, and I think that we need to have our legal counsel and also people from those that are working on the master plan take a look at this, because if it is not, if it doesn't become a county road, if it is dropped from plowing and things of that nature, it puts the airport at risk.
Right.
So I think that is something we need to look very carefully at.
And I remember you had mentioned that quite a bit. I think that's one maybe we, you know, I don't have like a maybe page for roads at the moment, but but that's one, you know, and just for reference for everybody, if, you know, Skyport isn't a county road, but we do everything on it. So we grade it, we plow it, we steam culverts if there are, replace them. So that's one that was just like, I think it's good that we should talk about now and figure out, do we either want to make it a county road or stop doing all the services on it?
Well, and we need to look at that, because whether or not that master plan moves
Right.
forward may be contingent on
Right.
it becoming a county road. The last time we had a master plan, there weren't as many rules and regulations in place, and there are a lot now. And I think also, we don't know what the average daily traffic is on that road, but I think if you were to look at it, whether it be December or January and also in the summer, you'd find a really high count there.
Right. No, I believe it. I mean, I know they host a lot of snow. I mean, they're one of the few places open in the winter, so.
Right. And I think also the fact that that lower old airstrip area is likely to be developed at some level in the coming decades. And so that also is critical, that we have access to that space.
Maybe that's one we can put, and we don't, I mean, you and I don't have to talk about it now, but it's something for us to consider of, you know, should we move this over to the additions one? And then really try and figure out that formal process, like you're saying, if we have to talk to FAA or whoever on that, we can try and figure that out. Because if we're already, you know, kind of the point with the other roads we talked about adding, we're already doing the work on it, you know, or we're doing the majority of the work on it. So formally making it a county road isn't that much of an extra lift, you know, for us. Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else for Rob? Yes.
Yeah, and maybe you mentioned this or implied it in the Brandon Lane standards, but just to Commissioner Gamble's question about the process of creating a county road again, having those standards in place, because it sounds like none of these
No.
are up to county standards, so we wouldn't want to add it unless it was up to county standards, which is really expensive, so
Right.
there's that hindrance, I would say. But I echo just that this is extremely helpful, this information. It gives so much more perspective on the lay of the land and what the costs are, and like the residents that would be impacted, the non-residents that would be impacted, and then the zoning issues too, or the zoning potential issues as well. I don't have any, I mean, maybe this isn't fair, but it feels like with so few homesteads impacted, that it's easier for me. I feel more comfortable going down this path. I was very hesitant to, you know, lessen services for people, and transportation is an issue in our county, so, but this really does help me gain perspective on the impact, so. Surprised at the cost as well. I thought it would be higher, but but there's opportunity for this too, so.
Commissioner White?
Is there a way that we could get these numbers on the screen for the public to see them, or is this on?
It's
On our
in-
web-
Yeah, it's in the agenda for today.
Okay.
Except for the last 2 columns.
Okay, so the listening public, go to Cook County website, to meetings and agendas, to committee of the whole,
Yep.
and you'll see these charts. You'll be able to see the numbers they're looking at.
Yes.
And certainly with the minutes, we can add the additional 2 columns.
Okay. There's just a couple of extra land use things that we had put together in that spreadsheet. No, it's okay, we didn't do it till like
Oh, okay.
yesterday.
Oh. Okay, okay.
Nothing got missed, yeah.
I'll make a note of add this to the minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So if the board came to you
Mhm.
and said, we're looking at the budget, our road budget maintenance, and we'd like you to go through and determine maybe where we could have some cost savings to reduce budget
Mhm.
in our maintenance. And it's just good to step back and reevaluate every now and then, see where we're at, so that our dollars are being applied where it makes most sense.
Mhm.
So if the board had come to you with the initiative to do that, then I would imagine you would have set up some criteria to evaluate that. And so that's simply to say, this is the criteria basically that you used in making that evaluation?
Yeah, and I think,
Well, I was gonna add.
sure,
What this doesn't reflect, especially in the numbers, and to your point that the numbers appear low, is actually the county's liability. So this doesn't, what all these roads represent is actually like what the county is responsible for. Like, so anybody on one of these roads calls us about any issue, and we respond to it. So just because they don't require a lot of annual maintenance on average, doesn't mean that now, anytime somebody calls, we don't go out and respond. So I view these much more as reducing the liability of, the overall liability of the highway department, especially to pretty marginal roads that could wash out, that could require repair, that could require steaming culverts, that kind of thing. So again, you know, this is a lot of information, but it doesn't actually tell that story either.
I think to your point too, and it's something we've talked about on and off, I think at highway committee or, you know, random topics, you know, where could we look for savings in our budget? Something I've always, like right off the bat, if somebody ever asked, I'd say calcium chloride. So cutting roads is one thing, is far more complicated. You know, if we're looking for immediate things, you know, it's that type of thing. We spend a lot of money on that. I'm not denying that it's good for the roads, but that's kind of what do I want to say, a cherry on top type of thing, where
That's a quick savings.
It's always
We can-
what we go to.
and it's a very quick savings. It's okay, we don't do the contract, done. You know, and so that, you know, that's something that we actually, in developing our chloride policy, kind of was coming from that of we just kept spending on it, and it's like, okay, I can't keep up with this anymore. This is insane. Let's cap it. And so, you know, that could be something, you know, when we talk savings. Off the top of my head, I would say that, and then I think this is another part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you looked at that from an expenditure standpoint relative to the roads we're talking about, that would be another element of savings that's residual to that element. When the Forest Service says, we're gonna no longer maintain these roads, and in the past, they use some criteria, and they just said, we're gonna close these roads down. That's
Right.
it. We're just gonna let them go back to whatever, vegetation. And so, you know, they had some criteria, but then we had people saying, oh, wait a minute, we rely, you know, on this or that or the other. And so I think from the public standpoint, if we're personally affected on that road, it's always difficult. In the broader context of trying to be good stewards financially and look at where it makes sense to put our energies, both dollars and time, then a thoughtful process that supports that, that's commendable. And so I think anything that we do, especially when it comes to, you know, Commissioner Mills' point about cutting services, we want to do that knowingly and empathetically, but we have to be able to manage stewardship of dollars, and this demonstrates that, so I appreciate the work.
Thanks. Yeah, it's kind of to Matt's point, you know, this is our, whether you want to call it a phase one or a tier one, or this is the first look at really looking at the system in depth and trying to say like, okay, what makes sense? You know, where can we change things? So, yeah.
Thank you for all of this, you
Absolutely.
and Matt, and digging around and getting the historical perspective of it too.
Yes.
Appreciate it all, so.
Appreciate it. I
Lots
think-
of things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, we'll move the last thing I'll say is that Skyport Lane we can take off of here. That seems to be a much bigger discussion. And then, if there's anything else you guys think of, you know, maybe I don't know, May, June. I don't know if we want to move super forward with a board meeting to like make it official, or we would need to digest for a month or two, but, you know, things to think about.
Madam Chair, I would just suggest that before it comes to us, that one element about, on the legal side,
Oh, yes.
just so we cover that.
Yes.
And I think from a timing standpoint, I don't know that it needs to distill. I think we've had the discussion, but I think that's, before it comes from before the board, we need to answer that
Yes,
question.
good, thank you. Cool, okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thank you. Our next topic, the county fleet, vehicle fleet, and we have Brooke Lassard, who's going to give us all the nitty-gritty facts of this transportation issue.
So, if I could, I'd like to maybe tee this up. The last time I know this came before the board, I was actually interim administrator then. It was in almost exactly 5 years ago, in March 2020, before we ended up kind of shutting everything down with COVID. And I had brought to the board Enterprise to do a presentation. I think, Jenny, you were on the board still, and David was on the board, to just do a presentation on turning our fleet over to a more leased option like the Sheriff's Department had done. It was very, I thought, you know, was well received, and then the next week we were shutting down the county, and we had no idea what our funding was going to look like or if people were going to be able to pay taxes, and it kind of went away. So what I think, you know, the state of our fleet is very much like the state of some of our other capital. It's, you know, there's been a lot of cans kicked down the road, and so it requires some attention. And, you know, I think Brooke has really been looking at this, and we'll make sure this information actually makes it to the agenda, but I thought, or to the agenda online. But I just wanted to say that this is something that's sort of like been in the works for, as I remember, at least 5 years, and not been really addressed in all that time. So go for it, Brooke.
Thank you. So today's main purpose is just present the information and have a general discussion to inform decisions related to the meeting the vehicle fleet needs. So our current situation is we have 17 vehicles maintained by my department, and in the last year that number fell to 14. One was totaled, one died, one was given to the airport for a courtesy vehicle. 5 of the oldest vehicles need to be replaced due to high mileage and age and significant maintenance issues that one of them we don't even drive anymore. The remaining fleet, what we're proposing is the remaining fleet consists of 9 vehicles ranging from 2010 to 2017. So we would get rid of our 5 oldest vehicles ranging from 1999 to 2009 would be the ones we would get rid of. Currently have 125,000 in the fleet fund used for maintenance, gas, and vehicle replacement. Past maintenance costs are $41,000 in 2023 and $35,800 in 2024. And because of our aging vehicles and our high cost in maintenance, our vehicle fund has been going in the wrong direction since about mid-COVID is what Brady has let me know. So currently, last year, our mileage reimbursement was $50,475, and our expense was $63,677. That's maintenance and gasoline. So we lost $13,202 in the fund. Short-term needs for the field season, the assessor needs 2 vehicles, land services, two vehicles, and soil and water, 2 vehicles as well. And then all year, including those 6, would be maintenance, we use 3, public health and human services 1, and then radio communication 1 as well. So 11 vehicles needed on a daily basis during the field season. 5 of those are dedicated year-round. Restoring the fleet to 16 vehicles ensures the department needs are met and provides 4 vehicles available for fleet pool for daily drivers. Currently, we're having we'll get a reservation for a vehicle, and we're kind of running around to departments and asking, hey, are you using your vehicle on this day? Okay, you are, so we'll go to another department and see if we can borrow one of the other department vehicles to get our needs met. During the field season, staff are often traveling on minimally maintained roads. Other staff, such as public health and human services, are often traveling with clients over long distances. Winter conditions are also considered in the vehicle choices. So the current recommendation would be get back to 16 vehicles, 9 from the existing fleet, 6 of the RAV4 all-wheel drive SUVs, and 1 newer used cargo van, kind of depending on what option we would like to go with.
I like the RAV choice.
Yeah, they're just a solid vehicle, to get our maintenance costs down as well.
I've driven them for years, and it's like you can put 200,000-300,000 miles on them.
Yep.
Not that you'd want to here, but.
No, but we'd like to get our use out of them as
Get
well,
the
because
use, for
vehicles
sure.
are expensive.
Yes.
I would also add that some of the cars that are left in the fleet are more like sedans, rear-wheel drive sedans.
Yeah, we've got,
And so for winter driving or for like a road like Tom Lake Road or something, these can be not the ideal cars for people.
a couple Chevy Impalas would be on the list to get rid of. Dodge Avenger, and then a few of our older Ford Escapes.
Do you put different tires on, like winter tires versus?
We don't.
Or
We
all
don't.
season
We just do an all
tires?
season
All
when we
season.
change out tires, yeah.
Yeah.
So we basically come down to 3 options. First option is what kind of we've been going through with the enterprise government leasing program. And it's a leasing program, but it's at 7.49% interest rate for 60 months, and then it includes maintenance, and that would be financing the vehicle. The enterprise would like you to turn them over because then you have a higher value. But in our situation up here in our low mileage, we would basically just use it as financing and get maintenance for the first 5 years. And then own the vehicle outright and keep the vehicle for longer. The lease for 5 years with a $6,000 payment at the end would be a $612 payment. Lease for 5 years with 0 payment at the end would be a $695 payment, and the lease with 5 years for the cargo van would be $1,150 a month with a 0 payment at the end. I consulted with a couple other counties. They're all, the one who I got the most information for, most like us, would be Lake County. And they do the 5-year with a 0 payment off at the end, and then they just assess on a yearly basis. He does it in January, and he just assesses mileage, age, what condition the vehicle's in, and then he determines how he's gonna go about either getting rid of those vehicles or keeping them on. The pros for that is it's the easy button for me. I can just make a phone call and we can get the vehicles here. We would, at the end of 5 years, we would own the vehicles. They'd be well maintained. These vehicles would be in the county fleet for another 5 to 10 years then. The cons of that would be the current vehicle fund would not be able to cover the leasing and car maintenance using the current funding formula. This choice would require additional funding to the 2026 budget. Option 2 would be a buy and lease combination. Buying vehicles provides some flexibility to shop for newer used vehicles, and the monthly lease commitment is less. Cons would be the maintenance costs are not included, so maintenance needs to be covered by the vehicle fund. Adjustments to the vehicle fund, again, would also probably need to be taken. And option number 3 is rental for the summer. The pros are you only pay during the busy rental season. The cons are your investment does not build any equity, so we would not own the vehicles, we just turn them back over. And it's a very expensive route to go as well. It'd take a lot of logistics issues, because we'd have to go to Duluth every time we need a vehicle, bring the vehicles back to Duluth. So in summary, this is an issue that must be addressed very soon. We took it to the MAT team. Everybody in the MAT team is the ones pushing me to get these vehicles, because I've taken some are broken down, some are old. So we need at least 2 vehicles to meet the summer commitment for field work. This minimal approach is inadequate due to the age of the current fleet, which are often out due to maintenance issues.
So I just want to say that there's a very short-term need here to get at least a few more vehicles. And if another one of these vehicles ends up having a problem, which they do, then we're down again. So we probably need to think about, in the short term, at least 4 vehicles. But I think there's also a need, maybe not today or not in this near thing, but to start talking about how we start replacing the fleet and getting it more in an operational model so that we're never in this spot again. And, that's certainly a process. But I think, hopefully you guys can start talking about the information you saw, but I want you to really think about, probably at the next board meeting or very soon after, we're gonna have to bring this to you, you're gonna have to make a decision about how you wanna do this, because the field season is upon us, and we have to know how we're gonna do that, so.
Right, I'm already kind of lining up people
Right.
to borrow vehicles from other departments that,
And pretty soon, that's not even gonna be adequate.
right, right.
So,
So out of these choices, what would be your recommendation?
Well, my recommendation, I think, for my standpoint, I would like to, the cargo van is for us in the maintenance department, so I could shop for that used. I would like to do the lease on the 6 RAV4s, so kind of a hybrid option, do the lease on the RAV4s, and then I could shop for a used cargo van for us, for our custodial needs.
Okay.
So speaking of hybrid,
Yeah.
what's have you looked for hybrid, and I'm going to say used hybrid RAV4s?
I haven't looked, I had them priced out, and we did an analysis on the hybrids for the lease program. And with the amount of miles we're putting on, it doesn't pay for the additional cost to procure the vehicle. The payback wouldn't work out for us. And then as we age out, we don't know what the maintenance is gonna be like on those hybrid vehicles. So that kind of unknown part, we were just gonna stick with their bulletproof inline 4-cylinder, and their standard automatic transmission is a tried and true, well-proven drivetrain.
Commissioner Gamble?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Brooke. I guess what I would like to see, and some of these numbers appear here, but if you track what our mileage consistently has been, if we're contributing to a fund at 70 cents per mile, so if we look at, we consider all the options. One option is that staff use their car. We're just going to say that is an option at 70 cents a mile. If we look at what it is, because we're in effect paying that 70 cents a mile right now into a fund, so it's, either way, you're going to get that calculation. If you take a calculation of what our mileage typically is and you project that amount of money in the fund, and then you look at our option of leasing and what that costs, including the maintenance, and then you look at the option of buying and then our track maintenance costs and what that is, that you could show how that all breaks out, just from a number standpoint. The other thing is that if you say, well, if we were to buy new and negotiate fleet prices, and if we were to lease, if we were to buy used, with the used market being where it's at, I don't think you're gonna get, I mean, I'm just gonna say, I don't think for the kind of car we're looking for, if we're looking at Toyotas, and there's a reason why that makes sense. But I don't know if, given, we'd have to really know where we're getting those cars and what we're gonna get when it comes to the maintenance side of it. So I just don't want it to be a false reality, you know, by thinking we're saving money by buying the used, given the used market.
Yeah, and I did price out some of the used ones, and with the government purchasing program, and then also Enterprise gets another $1,000 off, I'm actually currently getting a brand-new vehicle for cheaper than one that's a couple years old with 20 to 30,000 miles.
Yeah, and that's just something that needs to be answered, because
Yeah.
it's a question, why can't
Yeah.
we?
Yeah.
And, but the thing that I'd like to see, and maybe it's here, just not in the format visually, is that what is our funding based upon our mileage history? And is there anything that's gonna change in that regard now, either because mandated or something we've learned? And so that's a realistic figure relative to what's going into the fund at 70 cents a mile. Now, when you look at that funding, and then you look at the difference between outright purchase at government price, anything else we can negotiate with a fleet price. The other question that you raised is that if you look at Lake, and they say they've gone with this 5-year, and then you made the comment that we figure we can keep those vehicles after we bought them an additional 5 years. Did you ask that question of Lake as to what they do, what they found through their experience as to that 5-year projection of having at least at 5, have it another 5, so basically a 10-year cycle?
Yeah, and when I talked to the facilities director at Lake, that's when they assess it on a vehicle-by-vehicle basis, see what the value of it is, so when they get the trade-in back to Enterprise, to see what that is compared to the problems they've had and condition of the vehicle. So they assess every January their entire fleet, and then they go to Enterprise and order that October, because you have to order by October to get even better pricing than we would get right now, because we're kind of, I need them sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But when you do your order in October, then you get the fleet pricing, they order exactly what you want. And it's
I
a
guess-
better deal. But they're keeping them anywhere from 5 to 10 to 12 years on some of them.
I guess I'd like to know the difference in that pricing, meaning that if we dealt with the immediate and looked at the long-term in that October pricing range. what
Well, the problem we're gonna end up with there is, when I talk to our representative, they're anticipating a $6,000 per vehicle price increase coming sometime in
Tariffs.
mid-July to August. You
So
know,
we're also trying to get ahead of
we're
that.
trying to,
Getting ahead.
I'm
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
get in
that
there
make-
quick to
that-
get,
that-
yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
But in the future, understanding that
Right.
Right,
it's the
right.
time of year you
Absolutely.
buy and whatever.
Yeah, October's when, I mean, once we get this set up, and when we're looking at doing the next purchase, we'll be ahead of the game. We'll do our purchase in October. They'll show up sometime mid-May, April, May is when you'd get the vehicle. So it's just a much longer process.
In the funding, obviously, it would be ideal if the funding source covers the cost.
And, you know, we'll probably be short, but from like, what Lake said, he's like, we talked about our fleet, and he's like, you're gonna see usage really go up once you get some nice vehicles in
Yeah.
there. Because people will not be
Right.
driving their own, you know, when I give them the option of a 2009 Chevy Impala to go down to St. Peter with, they're like, well, I'll just take my own car.
Well,
Yeah.
and not only that, but we've had, my understanding is we've had some of these older cars, like people are driving to a conference where they've spent on a hotel or whatever, the car breaks down, they don't get to the conference, there's no refund. So there are other costs, but some of these cars, Impalas and Avengers, and, you know, nobody wants to drive those in the winter to Duluth or to a meeting, right?
Yeah.
And so having a car that's more worthy, we'll probably see in the winter when those cars aren't needed for field work, be used more. And so that money comes back to support the fund rather than to, go to employees,
Yeah, I think that narrative is helpful in a presentation.
Mhm.
In other words, I think when you make a final presentation that goes before a board, that narrative is helpful. The other question which you probably explored is that if we have usage, in the summer season, whatever, the seasonal usage, that when we're looking, is it just rent by day, or is there a 6-month lease of fleet? Or somehow
There
you
is,
just,
yeah, we can do, it's a daily rate is what we quoted on here, and just this morning, Enterprise got back to me, and if we did do a 3 or longer month lease, our lease payment would be, depending on what exact vehicle, because you can't pick your vehicle, so depending on what exact vehicle we got for a small all-wheel drive SUV, we'd be looking at anywhere from like $1,750 to $1,900 a month for that 6-month lease. So we'd end up paying more in those 6 months than we would for an entire year, than we'd end up without any equity at all.
but that element as an option
Right,
in a flow chart.
yeah, yeah, looks
Would
good.
answer the question.
Yeah,
knowingly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you looking for then in terms of additional funding for the '26 budget? If you're looking at monthly payments, like you say, of 1,000 something?
Well, the expense would be, if we went with the lease, our expense would be close to $63,000
And that's with the van. So if
with
you
the
did
van,
something
yeah.
different
So
with
if
the
we
van.
drop the van, we'd be down to like $62,000, and that would be our annual expense. And if we continue to only bring in
Like 51, right?
Actually, it would be 51.
51,
Because the annual, that's a monthly 1150 for the cargo van, so that's
Yeah.
gonna be more like 12,000.
oh, yeah,
So
yeah,
it'd be more like 51,000.
51,000. So we'd still be, it could be closer if the mileage goes up, I can't really project what the Lake County gentleman said. He's like, you're gonna get a lot more usage out of these new vehicles.
But
It
is-
could, yeah.
It's reasonable.
Yeah,
It's reasonable
it is.
to, yeah, for sure, for
And-
sure.
and last year, even with this fleet, the revenue received was 50,000.
Right,
So, that still has to cover gas, and other maintenance on the older vehicles, but it's not a huge gap. If you've got more usage, that amount could go up.
right.
And if it was 50 last year with maintenance, if we were to go with Enterprise,
Maintenance would be
Maintenance is
included on
included.
those 6, yeah.
so,
Right. But you still have the maintenance on your older part of the fleet.
oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And, then you need kind of a long-term strategy to keep rolling.
Yeah,
those.
through the 9 existing vehicles, we still have higher maintenance costs. And the 2 shops in town are pretty good about getting us in and getting us done, but for some of the bigger issues, they sit down there for weeks at a time.
For me, I think if we could see those numbers underneath the options based upon realistic projections, that would be good. The other thing is, as Rita's mentioned and you've alluded to, is that we have an immediate need. So we need to address this in the context of immediate need, not driving a policy that affects negatively long-term.
Right,
Right.
right.
And I really like the idea of the fact that there's we need a replacement schedule. We need to do this regularly, so we're not ever in this bind again.
It really is, as I look at it, there's sort of like, what has to happen now? Maybe the minimum now is like 4 vehicles that we need here, because 2 just to meet the minimum, and 2 that are good in case 2 other ones end up in the shop, right?
Yep.
So there's kind of an immediate need to get through this season of 4 vehicles. Maybe so you start with a lease with that, I don't know.
Or maybe it's 4 in a van.
Right, right.
4 in a van.
And then beyond that, you kind of need to take the time, I think, and, work with Brady on budget or, how this might work. This is, certainly we've kind of put this together quickly. I appreciate what you're saying about a spreadsheet, but to understand how we can address this in a rolling fashion over several years, what does that take to finally get ourselves out of vehicles that are 26 years old?
Yeah, and I think that to the extent with everything you got on your plate, it can be done if we can look at it in the broader context in making the short-term decision. It'd be good. If we can't, realistically, we don't want to tongue-in-cheek it, but I think that the long-term policy, based upon what we know right now, if we're looking at all of our options, and some of them answer themselves, but still, to the public, we're looking at all the options, and then that informed decision says, this is what I think. This is based upon other people's experience. It's based upon our experience. Here's the numbers. Here's our projections. And honestly, we could look at maybe more funding, given the fact that people won't be using their cars. We're paying them 70 cents a mile anyway, and whatever, but I think that foundation would help inform, policy and decision moving forward.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Mills?
This might just be a typo or whatever, but what's this 35?
Yeah. In the bold print that prefaces.
Where at?
Just above 125,000 in the current situation. It's in bold.
That was just carried over last year's monthly maintenance cost.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's how much is in the fund right now, to start with.
Wait.
No, the 125 is what's in the fund right now.
Oh,
And I think that is just a typo because it just,
oh,
It's-
No, it's the same number.
yeah, it's the
Yeah.
same number as what we spent last year for
yep.
maintenance cost.
Maintenance cost. Yeah, it's really interesting. As you said in the intro, Rena, March 5 years ago, we were talking about this, and we were talking about, I guess, maybe it was only a year before that, and just what our options were. Enterprise fleet was kind of getting more and more used by more and more counties, and really seemed like the way to go. And then with the pandemic, it's like, okay, so we have zero costs, and so then we're just like, we have nothing to work off of here
Right.
except for history, and we don't know what's gonna happen in the future, especially with telework and just everything. So it feels appropriate, especially with the immediate need to be
Yeah.
going after this now. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that work, and I think it would be really helpful to have everything in a spreadsheet lined out, and also the historical costs more than last 2 years. There's definitely gonna be outliers there,
Mhm.
but I think that would just really help us better understand the bigger picture. So
And you could throw out the COVID years.
Yeah, there was a couple of years
Yeah.
there where it was, yeah.
Sorry.
Vote. Commissioner White?
Madam Chair, I forgot the first one. So how did we ever get in this situation to start with? Because the school has, like, forever had planning ahead, we're gonna have to rotate. The highway department does it, they put money aside for, why hasn't the count, it's just a question, probably nobody here actually has the answer. What the thinking was, why we didn't put a little bit aside.
I think that's an interesting rhetorical question, but
Yeah.
I think you could compare it to, the kicking the can down the road that has gone on.
With the
With-
buildings.
Yeah, with the buildings, and sometimes, well, can we postpone, a boiler for another year or whatever, and sooner or later, you have to deal with it, and so what, maybe if we'd started back in 2020, we'd already have a fleet that, we were doing this and it would be very manageable, and you get to the place where you know exactly how much money you're gonna spend every year, Right now, we don't know that because of the repair schedule, so that causes us to, but if you have these, in a lease program where you have no extra maintenance costs, now you've got gas costs with the fuel efficient things, and, you can predict a little bit better, Right now, it's pretty hard to predict.
It sounds like historically too, that before the vehicles got so old, the vehicle fund would replenish itself and it would go up instead of down like we are.
Right.
And then they would use that money to buy a vehicle here and there and sell one. I mean, that's how it worked in the past, from my understanding.
Madam Chair, and I think sooner rather than later, because of the tariffs and the increases, and it could go away. Let's just think maybe we'll punch them in faster, so let's.
Yeah, no, I've got some work to do to get this information put in a more palatable spreadsheet, and I'd like to come to the next board meeting. I mean, I'd like to do it quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Does Lake County garage their vehicles?
Good question. I didn't ask them that. I didn't
It'd
ask
be
them if they
interesting
garage
because
them.
of our investments, it's, how we manage that.
Yeah.
But it'd be an interesting,
Yeah.
the other thing is sometimes in the industry, you'll find that there's comparisons. So let's just say, what do you figure that it costs, for a fleet in this region? And I don't know that AMC has ever done anything in a study like that, but it would be interesting, and when I would do budgets, I would use comparables relative to size of budget in similar organizations, region, and nature of organization. And I'd print those so that when somebody's looking at the budget, they could say, well, how come you're spending this? How come you're, so many percent under this in personnel or marketing or whatever it might be? And I think some of those things are just good if we had some statistical thing that would show in the Midwest, this is typically, and here's where we're at. And it's sort of a benchmark.
Yeah, it's kind of like the construction costs where we take Duluth costs plus 20%.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we just know.
And just show it, but what it does is it's an accountability measure that is there, that we're saying it there because it holds us to that, at least that perspective of standard.
Yep. And to answer your question before, it kind of came back to me. The Lake County is right next to the shop that does all the maintenance on their vehicles, and they actually park their vehicles behind that shop. So they are
Okay.
just outside in a lot
Yeah,
behind.
okay, yeah.
Well, the next board meeting is next week, but to give you time if you want to, wait until the first one in May, too. Either
Yeah,
way.
well, we can see. I'd
See
like
what
to-
you can
If-
put together.
Yeah.
If you were to not get a decision until the second week in May, would you be able to get things in time?
Probably not, because I probably wouldn't be able to get anything till June. I mean, that's why I'd like to get it done. That's why I've got some work to do for next week's meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I need them sooner rather than later. I'm kind of running out of time here.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Do you have enough info now?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Great.
And maybe in that ask then, and I think you said it here, this is my minimal, but this is,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, going into the season. This is what we could, and this
Right.
is what,
What I'd like to do, yeah. Yep. Sounds good?
The only other question I have is just about the interest.
that's crazy.
It
Yeah,
is, and I did talk to Mark Youngdahl down at the local bank, and I'm waiting on an answer for him to see if we could finance locally through him. The only thing, we don't get our maintenance included in that.
I think it's subsidized.
Yeah, but the nice thing is that Toyota does give you a year or two of maintenance. It's just getting it down to Duluth to a Toyota dealership then, where the maintenance that's provided by Enterprise, our local shops can do it, and because the county department, because the sheriff's department already has Enterprise, both of them are already signed up as licensed Enterprise mechanics, so
That's
it is nice that we can do it locally, all the maintenance that's included.
Right.
Did you happen to ask Lake or whomever you queried on this, what their interest rate is?
It's depending on when you signed up, it changes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be interesting to
Yeah.
know, because I would use that respectfully as leverage.
Yeah.
Yeah. My
Well,
board is a little hesitant here, given that, and the
Yeah, they
fact that
just use
so-and-so
yeah,
got whatever,
it's like,
so.
it's one of the bond rates plus a half a percentage point is what they're what they're using, so it fluctuates with that.
I was just wondering if it was worthwhile looking at other options or even self-funding because
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if it's worthwhile.
It was brought up to me to maybe check with Brady about bonding or something like that, and that is not an option, is from
I-
what Brady said.
Yeah, I think one of the other options, these numbers are with zero down payment,
Hmm.
is that you could use some of
Mhm.
the existing fund
Mhm.
and pay down those
Mhm.
leases,
Mhm.
you know, to begin with. And
Yeah.
then your monthly payment would be less over that 5 years. So
We-
there's another kind of an option there,
Yeah.
because we do have some money in there.
And we could adjust it also, so we could make a down payment and then a balloon payment at the end, where after your lease, you've got a $6,000 to $10,000 payment at the end of the lease. I mean, they can set it up any way we want to set it up, and then
Yeah.
we'd be paying less interest on that.
That was what I was aiming for, so
Yeah.
otherwise I don't really care as far as, you know, whatever makes
Right.
your world work there.
They'll do it whichever way would work for us.
Yeah,
They'll,
so-
they'll set everything.
Yeah, to the point of the maintenance being included through enterprise, I mean, could we pay them down to $1 and then still get the maintenance, you know, like how, there's gotta be a maximum pay down that they allow or something. you know,
Yeah, I'll have to
so
check on that, yeah.
Just another thing to consider, but nothing to die on.
And there's
Yeah.
no other rental companies that are wanting
There's
to
a
get
lot of them.
competitive?
There's a lot of them, but they will not, most of them have a minimum of 100 to 200 fleet. Enterprise is the only one that will deal with us
I
with our
see.
small fleet.
Okay.
And-
They're all interested in the big players that have giant fleets, yeah.
And that's something that, you know, like we've done in other areas where we joint buy, maybe we could in the Arrowhead, look at our fleet and,
Well, that's
Yeah.
what enterprise is actually. is,
Yeah.
AMC, like enterprise is a business partner with AMC, and
AMC,
so
right.
that's.
oh, I see.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, if you were to buy these outright, let's say fund them through the bank, you would pay more for the vehicles,
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah, we get
even
a
though
nice
you're getting
break
a
from
less of an
Enterprise.
interest rate, you wouldn't get the maintenance and you pay more for the vehicles. So we get this buying power of AMC
Yeah.
and these government
Yeah.
rates, so.
Yeah, his quote was significantly less than, I went through the state site that Robbie provided me with, and they have one Toyota dealership that handles all of them, it's Burnsville Toyota. And when I got pricing from him, the enterprise pricing was about $2,000 per vehicle less than I
Yeah.
could get
Yeah.
them through the state
Yeah.
purchasing program.
Yeah, I appreciate knowing that. so.
Yeah,
And have you looked for Toyota cargo vans?
no, I have not. I have not. I don't think they make one, but,
A Toyota cargo van, four-wheel drive, air conditioning, surround
yeah,
sound.
yeah,
Yeah,
Oh, wait, that's Mercedes, never mind.
yeah.
I mean, we did it when we were looking at the, I think with corrections,
Oh.
we needed to have a four-wheel drive van.
And that's the van I'm pricing again is all-wheel drive.
Yeah.
It's the all-wheel drive van. Our van has some major leaking issues and is rear-wheel drive, so nobody likes to drive it in the winter. But then we have issues with cardboard and garbage that we have to take care of very quickly then, because it's out in the elements.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And look
Thank you,
forward
Commissioners.
to all your facts and
Thanks, Rita.
figures.
Thanks, Brooke.
Okay, now we're going to hear about proposal changes to the Cook County zoning and subdivision ordinances with Neva Maxwell.
So I think I have this right. Neva presented this to the Planning Commission on last Wednesday, these changes, and it was passed unanimously. So you were going to see them next week anyway to do the board approval based on that recommendation. But I got the chance to see this before I was actually in this position. Neva had asked me to review it. It's just outstanding work. I just can't say enough of how lucky we are to have young talent like this here. And, you know, this is really the future leadership in this county, as far as I'm concerned. And so I really wanted you to have the opportunity to see it more in depth, rather than just approve it. So that's why we scheduled it for today, and really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Rena. Just one real quick clarification. So last week's presentation to the Planning Commission was just informational. It was no public hearing. This hasn't been public notice or anything like that. So just procedurally where we're at is this is just the foundation of getting information out there and explaining what these ideas are. And then after I'm meeting with you today, tomorrow I'll meet with the AHRA and give them an overview of this. And I'm still talking and checking in with a couple more contractors to get their take on it. After I get all that feedback, I'm going to make some last minute little modifications before I send it out for public hearing and public notice, because it'll be a very lengthy newspaper legal notice. I want to be sure I get it accurate the first time. And then it will go before the Planning Commission at their May meeting for the public hearing, so people can come in and tell the Planning Commission what things they think about this, and then the Planning Commission can make their recommendation, and then it would come to you at the last meeting in May. So that's just a clarification on where we're at. So nobody is wondering if they missed something. So
It's still good, though.
That it is.
we're working our way there. So Jana, if you want to put the presentation on, and I'm totally okay if you want to pause me in the middle of going over this with questions, because this is dense. This is like dense zoning stuff. So
Could I ask?
it could maybe get denser. You know, I will say I have on one of these slides, I think I say I'm trying to make it simple, and that's hilarious. But this is me trying to make things simpler.
I just wanted to ask a question up front. What was the impetus for this?
How to phrase this the right way. I've heard that you can't buy a house in Cook County without plumbing, water, flushing toilet for less than $300,000. So I figured maybe there's something that zoning can do to try to address our housing issues. So this is all getting to the heart of housing. So what in our zoning scheme, and again, for anyone listening, this is all of the area outside of city limits. I have nothing to do with inside city limit area.
Yeah.
So what can our county rural zoning do to try to see, if there's other zoning practices we can use to try to get ahead of the zoning curve, and I'll talk about some of that in this. And then B, find our existing ordinances and how we can streamline those processes. And I didn't really talk about the streamlining in this presentation, but what I have in the draft document is kind of relocating in the plating process when we're expecting to see like an HOA document, or when we want to see a full septic design. Recently, we processed the Temperance Trails preliminary plat, and that's a process that also needed a conditional use permit first, because it's a planned unit development. And through that conditional use permit and then the preliminary plat, the contractor developer was never really ready to provide the septic details for the design and also the HOA. So for both of those processes, I had been talking to you guys and the Planning Commission, in that, you know, the ordinance wants to see more information than this developer has, but the developer is asking you to kind of approve this. And so everything is hypothetical on that project right now. And, you know, if we're being lenient up to that stage, the final check mark is before the final plat is approved, they need to be able to provide a full septic design. And really, that's where the rubber meets the road. If you say you can do this, you're really going to have to show up before the final plat gets approved. So I'm making adjustments in this ordinance amendment that would basically recognize that process we're already doing. Like an HOA document, they're not ready at preliminary plat with that much detail. The developer just gave us like a boilerplate one that was really useless for any form of review. So it's just a waste of everyone's time, in my opinion, at that point. So, so that's when I talk about streamlining, it might not be in this exact presentation, but it is in the actual ordinance changes I have for other types of subdivisions and platting processes. So what I have for you today is a new mechanism that we haven't had in Cook County. So these are, I'm primarily presenting on the residential open space overlay district. And I should start with what an overlay district is. So an overlay district is where you keep the original zoning. We're not changing anyone's zoning that it is right now. It is essentially putting another zone district on top of that, that adds maybe restrictions on uses or allows different things than what the original zoning would have. We have one overlay district in Cook County, that's the Wildwood Acres overlay district in Tofty. So it's FAR 3 zoning underneath, and then it's the Wildwood Acres zoning over that. And so our office is used to using this type of mechanism, but we haven't used it beyond that one part. So that was more of a clarification of existing small lots. So here we are. My clicker is going to work here in a minute. I started so well, and then,
Here, hold on, let me try closing it and reopening this.
Okay.
If that helps.
any questions about what an overlay district is? Because if you don't get that concept, the rest of this might be kind of muck.
Okay, will that work?
No.
Let's try different.
While Jana's working on that, the proposed changes affect both the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance. So the overlay district is connected to the zoning ordinance. That's all zoning based, and that's where we regulate the uses that are allowed, and that's, in my mind, a key part of my attempt to address affordable housing. And then the subdivision is allowing that open space provision as an open space subdivision, which we already have, is just modifying it.
Can it be tabbed like they used to do with slides when the presenter told the person to hit the tab?
Beep, that thing.
You mean when they just go like that?
Well, and it's
Can you,
it's the computer, right, that's receiving the.
Can you just hit the, you just tell her when you want her to.
yeah, she just touches the tab bar, I think.
Can we call Jana Vanna for
Jana
part of
Vanna.
the presentation? Or maybe Jana
Yeah,
White?
I'll just do it.
Okay.
I don't know what.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jana. All
Okay,
right.
here we go.
Okay, you can click it. Beep.
Oh, see, it's not even there. This-
Oh, no.
Okay,
No, they
what's
keep
going
adding.
on?
Is that all the whole thing?
Why
Yeah,
isn't Rowan
hopefully
showing?
not. It was just
There we
their
go.
silly titles
Yay.
page.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Yay.
All right, so to Commissioners Gamble points, why are we doing this? So this is just kind of my current conditions sort of slide. So Cook County is, as many of us know, and so we're all on the same page, 9% private land ownership. We have high cost to develop land. As I've been talking with private entities, we're beginning septic systems for one home at $30,000, another $20,000 to put in the private well. You add in the driveway and the electric, it gets to $60,000 pretty quickly just to get that infrastructure in place. Contractors are in high demand. Affordable starter homes have a difficult time competing with those high-end second homes. As I've spoken with a couple of contractors, you know, they've got a business to run and they can make more money building a really large vacation home. So that's just the market that we're in. And so what can zoning do to try to compete with that? So zone district patterns in Cook County, they have a large minimum lot size in the rural areas. And I'm being very conscientious with these proposals to not mess that up, right? I don't want to mess up Cook County with this. So how do we maintain our character in the rural areas and still try to address the housing issue? And then one thing that's working on our side is that our current conditions are really lenient for residential development. Every residential lot in Cook County is allowed to have one primary dwelling and one guest cabin per residential lot, regardless if your lot is a conforming lot or whether it has more than the conforming lot size. When I worked at a different county, they required double the minimum lot size in order to have a second dwelling. And if you were on shoreland, you needed 1.5 water frontage, and the second dwelling had to be 1.5 times setback from the setback standard. It got very messy, and it was a lot more difficult, you know, restrictive to be able to put up that second dwelling. In Cook County, when I got here, and I was like, oh, you just get a second residential dwelling, and there's no extra provisions needed. I was flabbergasted that it was so lenient. And now I see why, because we've got a lot of other things working against us as far as residential development goes, and it makes sense. So, you know, keep that in mind, that if someone's really worried about this is going to increase a lot of development, we already allow 2 dwellings and a bunkhouse for every residential lot. What this is going to allow is 1 dwelling per lot, but 1.5 times more lot density than what you would have been allowed before. So more in private ownership. So if I buy I'm going to do an analogy. I'm going off the card. I hope you have time. So I have a lot, and I'm allowed 1 dwelling and 1 guest cabin. Now, instead of
What
me,
size lot?
any, Well, we'll get there. We'll get to sizes. We'll get to sizes. But, so it didn't matter before. I could have mine and the second dwelling on my lot, maybe I rent it out to someone, I Airbnb it. Now, I can sell it to Commissioner Mills, and Commissioner Mills can get a mortgage and do the lending stuff and own that second dense lot. And you only get one dwelling per lot. So we're not increasing like the residential lot potential, like lot dwelling density, but they could each be in separate ownership. So don't think too hard. Just that's kind of the concept I'm playing with. All right. So what can county zoning do to help city limits and help try to find solutions? Janet, next slide, please. The purposes of all of this, as Commissioner Gamble's question again, is why am I talking about this? I want to encourage workforce housing in areas where we have existing infrastructure. We need to preserve large tracts of land as open space, so all of these subdivisions would require 50% of the original lot size to be undeveloped. So if I have 40 acres and I'm looking to do this, 20 acres are in open space and will never be developed. And that's how we're trying to maintain that rural character of the area. All the developments clustered closer together. Also, I'm proposing to limit the uses, so no short-term vacation rentals would be allowed in this overlay district, and that's why the zoning component is important. We want to streamline the permitting processes and align the subdivision and zoning regulations to reduce administrative burdens. So again, the overlay district is our zoning mechanism for us to know in the land use office, you know, what uses are allowable here. So we actually kept track of this rather than just creating a plat and saying for this plat only you can't vacation rental. We'll lose track of that with time. So that's why the overlay district is important for that. If you want to switch the slide, Jana. And then why these changes matter, we want to address housing shortages by creating more housing opportunities, preserve our natural landscapes while allowing smart growth. As you'll see in the future slides, that 50% open space is a really helpful tool when we're thinking about the land itself. Who knows of 40 acres that are all high and dry with no wetlands, no steep slopes, no ledge rock? I mean, there's a couple of farm fields that have been drained, and then that's like it. So the wetlands and the steep slopes and the ledge rock and all those difficult things that develop around get put in the open space so that the people that live in this little community can go and traverse in there and enjoy that. But we don't have to worry about avoiding wetlands because we've done that naturally with the lot development. And then, yeah, preserving community character. My hope is that we wouldn't see the strongest pushback from the community because everybody wants housing, and also this open space can hopefully give neighbors a nice buffer from the dense housing. Jana, switch. Thank you. This is just the timeline. I wanted this on the screen so anyone who is watching this presentation online can see the details, but you don't need to read that necessarily. I just wanted to give a shout out. The origins of this began when I met with Jason Hale, our former HRA director, between 2023 and 2024, to just talk about zoning and housing, and if there's something we're overlooking in our office that can try to be a solution, or at least a small part of helping at least. Director Hale and I, former Director Hale and I worked together and talked through a lot of different ideas, and that worked me towards this proposal here. Between January and March of this year, I've been kind of doing the soft reach out to different interest groups, try to get their feedback, or at least give them the opportunity when this was an initial thought, so I could make any big changes pretty early in the process before I just sent this out to everyone. And then now we're kind of at step 2. I gave the Planning Commission presentation last week. Again, you guys today and the HRA tomorrow. The land use attorney's been consulted to kind of get their feedback on this. And then the next stage, stage 3, that I'm working my way into will be the public notice and then facilitating the public hearing and seeing really what the community thinks about that. And then that will be a big gauge as to whether we need more time to work out some potential problems that get observed through this, or to move forward and see if we can make this come to a reality. Jana, do you want to switch? So this is the open space subdivision illustration. So on the right is where we have conventional subdivisions, where you say minimum lot size is, 5 acres in the FAR3 zone district, and nobody can create a lot less than 5 acres in size. That's very easy. I work with people all day, every day on administrative subdivision applications. The open space subdivision is where you're taking those sensitive land features such as wetlands and bluffs and streams, and you're putting those in the open space so you don't have to worry about developing around them. And then you're clustering all the development together so that people can share the wetland, or share the septic and the water, shared well, shared septic. Your roads can be a lot less depending on the road design, so a lot less money for the actual infrastructure to support those houses. And yeah, Cook County landscape, wetlands, bluffs, steep slopes, ledge rock outcroppings equal difficult to develop. We have a lot of naturally occurring barriers for easy development up here. Jana, thank you. We have one kind of nice go-to example of what this size lot that I'm proposing could look like. So if anyone wants to take a drive up the Mink Ranch Road in Lutzen and drive around the cul-de-sac at the Woodland Foothills plat, these lots are like at 0.23 to 0.4 acres in size. Nobody ever complains about them. They're there, and it's a community that's building out. So these small lot sizes, again, are kind of the size examples I want people to think about when they're thinking, what does a 0.25 acre lot even look like? And this is a community shared septic system for this one.
Do you know the demographic of who occupies those?
Yeah, I haven't double checked my data recently. I had an earlier version of this where I think I had like 7 of those lots were homesteaded, maybe. That was how I was tracking that, but I haven't checked it recently.
And who lives there are people who work in the communities.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're local people.
And the reason I say it is that if you look at our wilderness and somebody's out there and they're surrounded by trees or whatever, they're isolated, and the layover is more like the city where you have people in close proximity. So I'm wondering, locally, with the mindset of I'm in the wilderness and surrounded by trees, I'm not used to being able to look and see my neighbor's house right next door. So the people that occupy that, if they get a job and this is affordable housing for them, and they're used to that, whereas up here when we're used to going out and our pajamas and not worrying about it kind of thing.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
it makes a difference based upon who the demographic is and what we see. And if it's driven, as you said in your comment about workforce housing, then the affordable element is more important to them just having housing and getting the job than it is being isolated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I look at my own demographic. I'm in my 30s with a kid, and we're trying to make it work up here. I would never have been able to buy into this housing market if I hadn't bought and sold my home in Silver Bay. That for us was a leg up to have the equity to buy up here. And I don't see that type of house here for my peers.
Right.
And so that's what I think, I would live up in Woodland Foothills if that was the option that was available to me. So I think at least the people trying to get housing anywhere are going to be a little less picky. And also, this isn't intended to be, this probably doesn't sound right, but it's not intended to be attractive for the second home people in a way. Like, I want this to be limited in a way. Like, this isn't like the dream home in Cook County. So that's, in some ways, this wasn't an attempt of making like the nicest version of lots. This was, how do we get housing in a way that might actually happen from my zoning perspective, at least. And I'm not a housing expert. This is just my thoughts. So, and this is just for, as we talk about the density stuff in the future, this was, 40 acres, that big square up there up top. There's 15 single, family home potential on 40 acres. So as you start seeing those numbers in future slides as to how many lots this can create, 15 kind of sounds alarming when you first hear it. Someone's going to get a notice in the paper, say like 15 single-family lots on 40 acres right next to me, but nobody on this road knows that this housing is really like there. We don't hear about it. So, and then the last thing to point out is halfway up Mink Ranch Road, you're going to see a lot of rectangular lots. That's what example of something that is just done through the administrative subdivision looks like. It's really inefficient. There's a ton of wetlands in the middle of all those rectangular lots. So their actual building space on those lots is very limited. Whereas if they had adopted like an open space subdivision model, it's a lot more efficient. It takes more platting effort. So.
And on that road up there, there's to the right, the turn-again lane, which I think is pretty well developed, but that's like a little community in itself, too. A mixed group there.
Yeah.
The other thing is in your propose with the visual you're giving us of the difference in the layout between the conventional and this is that, I mean, a developer is going to look at it and say, this is conducive for this type of development, because not everything has the perimeter having the wetlands and the problems, so
Yep.
that it allows for the, nestled development. So that, what we're seeing is we're seeing things that are conducive for that type of layout.
Yep.
But a developer's going to say, this isn't really conducive for it, because we're not going to be able to do that, because we have to work around this, work around that. So that the topography sort of dictates whether or not this is applicable.
Yeah, it's very flexible too. There's nothing that says all the lots need to be right next to each other.
Yeah.
You know, if you got mostly wetlands, but there's 2 parts dry on either
Yeah.
side, put half over here. It's a very flexible tool, because the open space doesn't have to all be in one location necessarily.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm just getting to the point that the presentation isn't trying to overlook that component by making it something that's very conducive, because this piece works real well for that. That's my point.
Sure.
And to the point of flexibility, yeah,
Yeah.
it's something that's considered in the proposal, yeah.
Yeah. Jana? Thanks. So this is, again, the main proposal is this residential open space overlay district. And the key parts of it is that it's going to maintain Cook County character with a 50% open space. That's an ambitious statement, but it's the goal. Allows the creation of, and maybe when I public notice this, say 2 times greater residential parcels from zone district standards to be owned separately. Again, this is trying to give builders the leverage to make the numbers work when they're looking at these developments. And so if they look at this, what the ordinance is allowing, and say, I could get 2 times residential lots, and then I can sell 2 times the residential lots, okay, it's gonna be worth going through the platting and get the wetland delineation and do all that versus the really large second home somewhere else. So that's kind of why I'm maybe gonna push it to 2 times, and I'm open to feedback as we talk through this a little bit. My original thoughts were 1.5, but I kind of, like, if we're gonna put all the work into this, like, kind of go big or go home, maybe is where I'm at the moment, but we'll see. I'm not offended to feedback, especially at this stage of the game. One key part also is that I'm proposing this only in the FAR 2 and the FAR 3 zone districts. Those are the zone districts that are right along the main road corridors, so you're not gonna be messing with the FAR 1, which is where the dog kennels are. I want to avoid land use conflicts where we can. So these are going to be the ones right off the Gunflint and the Caribou and the Arrowhead. And then,
And also, it's it's 10 acre and 5 hour.
correct,
Current, and FAR 1 is
20.
20.
Yep, yep. Yeah, so that's a perfect point. So FAR 2 is a 10-acre minimum lot size area, and FAR 3 is a 5-acre minimum lot size area. So this will naturally locate these closer to township, county, and state roads. And then it would be in non-shoreland areas. I want to avoid conflict with the DNR if possible. And if we were going to put this on lakeshore lots, it would kind of defeat my whole purpose of affordability. I got one caveat that, let's allow public streams in the open space, because there's a lot of public water courses everywhere in this county. And I'm trying to avoid where it's naturally prohibitive. And then strictly regulate the land uses to residential uses only. So as we talk about the actual overlay district, it's very limited to what activities are allowed in this area. And that's an intentional effort to try to get the goal. All right, next one, Jana. So where could this be? So again, the orange is the FAR 2, that's where 10-acre minimum lot size. This is a county zoning map, sorry. And then the yellow is the FAR 3. This map does not show you the differences between public and private. I could certainly have Kyle Oberg, our GIS analyst, put something together, but with all the different versions of this, I've avoided taking up his time and energy until I had something a little bit more serious. So future proposals will have an assist from MIS on that.
Generally, the private's where the colors are.
Yeah, mostly white is public for a lot of it. And then, so where is this applicable? It really is a relatively small area. A funny note, my first version of this proposed this only be considered within 5 miles of Lake Superior, because I was trying to keep it like close to infrastructure and resources, and then like the number of parcels, it just seems so little. It's like, I don't need to add extra limitations to this. I'm trying to keep it straightforward, so.
I think this graphic is an important one, because people in their imagination will take what you're telling them and imagine it, but this lets them see. So I appreciate you doing this, because when I reviewed the things before, I was looking at it saying, boy, if I could see where we're basically having the opportunity to do this, that's helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And certainly when this moves forward for a public hearing, I'll have assistance from MIS with something much more specific.
Yeah,
Yep. Jana? Thanks. So this is what the density allowance could create. And again, this is talking in parcels and acreage. So if I can interpret this for you, we've got two different zone districts examples. A through C are the FAR 2, which is the second column, the minimum zone district lot size. So in the FAR 2 zone district, you could create a parcel only as small as 10 acres. And then the last two rows are FAR 3 examples with that 5-acre minimum lot size. Then you go over to the next column. These are just examples. So just take, for example, that you've got an 80-acre parcel in the FAR 2 zone district. Standard density column, so I'm at like the fourth one over now. Would someone comes in, they say, I want to subdivide this, they could create up to 8 parcels, and it would take a little time, but that could be done through the administrative subdivision process. And then I'm calling it the ROSO multiplier, because it needs to be exciting. Sorry, this is so boring to other people, but it's so fun to me. You know, the original proposals was 1.5 times, and so I've told you earlier, I'm thinking of bouncing that up to 2 to really try to do really what we can to make this attractive to the private sector. But 1.5 could get you up to 12 private parcels, and those are single-family homes. So that's what this could result in, and then if there's ever a decimal, we just round up. I don't care. I'm not going to nitpick on that. So, Jana? So the step one, you know, how would someone actually do this? They would rezone to the overlay district, and through that process, we would do a rezone public hearing. So someone comes in and says, I want to be in this overlay district. Okay, apply for a rezone, and we'll see if that will work. And that kind of gives the neighbors a heads up. We see if it's really suitable. If there's a dog kennel right next door, we might think that might not be a great location. A lot of the FAR 2 is right next to FAR 1, where dog kennels are permitted. So we have to kind of be thinking about that. I was thinking about adding some language that kind of recognizes you might be next to rural uses in the purpose statement. And then considerations would be talking about if this is a good location for this type of thing. Again, public hearings. And I think one important thing with the rezone is it gives developers an early thumbs up that this looks feasible. They really need something to kind of work with if they're going to go through all the preliminary plating effort. Go ahead, Jenna. And then this is the purpose statement. I'm not going to read it to you because you're being very patient with me, but you can feel free to read it in here, and I'm constantly kind of tweaking and trying to fix this, so this will be associated with this. So this would be, again, in the zoning ordinance as an overlay district. So it's its own little special zone district area, and it's just going to be in little pockets where it makes sense for the community and get, if it works. Next, Jana. And then I have an applicability, so the applicability statement just says, like, it, you know, if you're not going to actually go through with platting it, then it's just going to default to FAR 2 and FAR 3. Because the question I raised in my mind was, what if someone rezones and they don't go all the way to platting? So this is kind of the safety button of like, okay, you've been rezoned to this, but if you haven't actually platted it, you're still FAR 2 or FAR 3. It's all kind of hypothetical at that point. And then eligibility, so this is kind of, you know, if someone's wondering, ooh, could this be next to me? I think the eligibility is kind of where I'm saying this seems like good locations for this. So it's within a half a mile, you know, is half a mile good? That's what I'm throwing out there. Of a state highway 61, a county or township road. Development's fully in non-shoreland area, and within the North Shore Management Zone, only on the non-lake side, so nothing along Lake Superior, which wouldn't make sense anyway. There's no FAR 2 or FAR 3 over there. And then the development zone, FAR 2 or FAR 3.
So what's the risk with meeting the plat? Like, what's the, why not just keep the rezoning? Why do you, what is that safety? Or what's the safety preventive?
Mm-hmm. You're asking why have...
I'll start over.
Yeah.
You said that if it's applied for the ROSO and given,
Yep.
but then they don't plat it,
Yep.
then it reverts. Why that?
People don't go through with plating all the time.
So what's the harm? in
It's just
that?
making it really clear, because if the harm is that people would look at this, all of this is intended to, from beginning to end, be completed. So if someone just did the rezone, but didn't do the plating, the overlay district has uses that we wouldn't apply in normal FAR 2 or FAR 3, and lot sizes that we wouldn't normally have in FAR 2 or FAR 3. So if I rezone my lot to Roseau, then I go to the county and say, I want a 0.25 acre parcel, I'm going to do an administrative subdivision to do it. It totally undermines the entire process. So I'm trying to really be sure if you get this benefit of this additional density, it's because you've gone through the work and you've made these assurances that things are being done right. And also, I'm just not smart enough to think through everything that could happen. So it's trying to be preventative of all the things we can't imagine happening, and there's going to be things that come up. I don't know that other counties have really tied their zoning and subdivision ordinance like this before. I haven't found a good example, at least. So we're trying to kind of create something new with this.
I think the criteria that's identified that answers the questions is critical. And it usually is in every situation. Be sure that you've anticipated, you understand, and then you've written a framework that keeps it with what's intended, so that you don't find out, oh my goodness, we missed this. And you said, you're not smart enough, contrary to what you are, but the fact is that the public hearing involving people, all of these things, oh, we didn't think about that, or this or that, the other. Making sure that what we've identified is applicable in every application that we get asked relative to this provision is huge. Yeah, it's well thought out, and there's good reasoning for it, and so somebody says, oh, that's smart, you did think that through, so that's good.
Yeah, we might tighten the language a little bit more still, just to make sure, to try to give ourselves some safeguards, so we're not creating some real zoning nightmares.
Avoid
county.
Subjective interpretation.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah, or like maybe a time period. I don't even know if it's feasible, but we've got time period allowances for different zoning decisions. I don't think that would really work for a rezone, but we'll get there. So those are different things we're trying to think through with this. Go ahead, Jana. And then the uses, and as you'll see on the bottom line, regulating the uses is key to why an overlay district is being proposed in this process. So the permitted uses, I'm saying one single-family dwelling per lot, per parcel. The duplex could be allowed when each unit is on a separate lot. I've worked with people who have come to our office wanting a duplex, and I sent out a public notice, and the neighbors were all up in arms about a duplex coming in next door. And so I don't want to hear that with this, because I think a duplex can be a really nice solution. And I'm saying it per lot because I'm envisioning, you could combine the two platted lots to be one parcel, and someone owns kind of a double lot as one parcel, and you get a duplex on there. And that can be a very affordable way to be living and renting. So I want that to be an option with this. Home occupation, so that's where, you're living at home and you're working out of your house. You're a tax person or accountant or something like that. One accessory structure up to 1,000 square feet with or without the existence of a primary dwelling. So, that's kind of a difficult one, but that's like you buy your lot, it's vacant, there's nothing there. You put up your garage to store your toys and the stuff, and you're living out of an RV while you build the house. And that's why the RV is up there too. So the accessory structure without the existence of a dwelling, and then the one RV, those are tools that we see people in our office trying to use as they're making those transitions to building out their development. And then for conditional uses, again, the idea of a conditional use is that it could work in the area, it just needs conditions or to see if it's suitable. So these are things that might work with this idea. 3 to 4 family dwelling in a single structure, multiple family dwellings, 5 or more units, home business and guest cabin. And number 1 and 2 there are really going to be key for how the septic is designed and the lot sizes. And it's just trying to be open to all the different things builders might say makes sense for them. So, I went into like a 4-plex once over in Lutzen. I was like, this is incredible. Why aren't there more of these? And like, it's just not affordable to like build it out. Well, maybe that will be affordable through the use of something like this. So, And then prohibited uses is vacation rental home and a bunkhouse. So again, just trying to be really tight to what actually is feasible in this area.
And can you differentiate a little bit more about home business versus home occupation?
Yeah, home business is where you're having people like come to the property. So like I've got, I sell a thing out of my house that people are coming and picking up, or a hairdresser. It's kind of a nice one. People are
Massage therapist.
constantly coming in and out all the time, so you get the traffic, maybe some signage, that sort of thing. It's kind of clear that there's something going on. And then home occupation, again, is like, you don't really have a public face. It's like you're doing the work out of your house, but maybe like someone doing woodworking in their house sort of thing, or something like that. So there is a more formal definition in the zoning ordinance, just for the record.
And another question, just, do you know how many bunkhouses we have?
No.
Do we have bunkhouses?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Go up the Gunflint Trail, they're all over the place up there.
Yep. Yeah. And,
All outside of resorts?
yep.
No, outside of people's cabins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and just so people are listening, so just the distinction there. So we view primary dwelling and guest cabin, there's really no difference. Just one was put out first, one is like the main usage one, and the guest cabin is the second dwelling. We don't have size differences, we don't have setback differences. Bunkhouse is a little different because it can't have any sanitary or kitchen facilities. So no bathroom, no kitchen. It's really intended to be like your screened-in sleeping space that your people stay at when they're visiting. So. And, yeah, so.
Multiple beds is what I always think.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
Isn't the
That's really
barn with the taco place, would that be considered a bunkhouse, or is that not?
I don't know that one well enough firsthand to answer.
Okay.
I also never give on the spot
I mean,
zoning
it's like when
answers.
you, what is it? I don't say hostel,
The
but
hungry
hostel.
hippie hostel?
Where
Oh.
you can come in and you got multiple people.
Sure, yeah.
If
I
that
think they
would-
might have gone through a CUP if I remember the files
Yeah.
correctly, but, yeah, and then the size requirements, again, this is what would be in the zoning ordinance to connect it to the subdivision ordinance. So minimum lot area of 0.25, and again, I have a little note there. The reason that's so small is to allow the cluster development, so everything's close together for the septic. It's intentional to be that small. The maximum lot area is 2 acres. I threw that in there. My thought is if I'm trying to take a stab at affordable development, and you gotta do like the comp study when you're buying your house, so how much you sell it for, I don't wanna have my little lot and the next door neighbor has like 5 acres and there's more I don't know. I'm trying to keep it all on the same playing field. Minimum lot width, 75 feet. Again, that's kind of staged off of the woodland foothills dimensions. Lot line setbacks are pretty similar to the R1 or lakeshore residential lot. And then road setbacks, I have that highlighted because I'm still kind of tinkering with those numbers to make them make a little bit more sense for builders. And then maximum lot coverage of 30%. And that's kind of a self-regulating sort of cap. So if you have a lot that's 1 acre, only 30% or 0.3 acres could be like impervious surfaces. Your driveway, the house, the garage, it naturally limits the size of the structures allowed. And again, that is an intentional thing to try to be scalable, because this is very flexible potentially.
Is bedrock calculated in that?
No.
It isn't.
There's some really.
That's interesting,
I know.
isn't it? Yeah.
It's supposed to be man-made, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely some lots where it's like,
Yeah.
this wasn't written with Cook County in mind on some of these definitions. All right, go ahead, Jana. And then, so you got your rezone approved, you're now in the overlay district. The next steps would be platting, and I'm not gonna go into platting, but I'm proposing the same mechanism we already have. We already have an open space subdivision process. That is a preliminary plat and then a final plat. Really, the only difference is that I'm saying you can get even more density than you would have been allowed before. That makes it more, makes the numbers work for the contractors. So, be an open space subdivision, follows standard preliminary plat processes, and then a common interest community would be needed if there's a shared septic and well to create an HOA, to have that homeowners association have that legal responsibility for the shared utilities system. And then it goes over to the final plat, and before the final plat's issued, that's where really the septic design details need to get nailed down, and the HOA agreement's nice and clear, and electronic submittals can be used instead of paper submittals.
So we had costs for just development.
Mhm.
What are these costs in general, do you know?
I think it's all over the board. I have no clue. Maybe when I talk with the HRA tomorrow, they'll have better ideas. But-
Because I think that's worth
Yeah,
talking about.
totally. Yeah. I am an open book on feedback at this point, because I don't want to be turning my wheels for no reason. Go ahead, Jana. Additional considerations, so these are the things that are still kind of, I want either more thought on or feedback or just key points to keep in mind. So the 2 times density maximum is being considered to help quote unquote make the numbers work for builders. So kind of keep in mind and feel free to give me feedback if you think it's a good idea to move forward with a public hearing to put that idea out there for people's feedback. Tentative provisions to address wildland urban interface and site design and sustain fire adapted community. That's a new thought that came to mind as I was on a long road trip across Wisconsin last weekend. I was like, I should probably think about that at this stage of the game. So I don't know what the answer is, but that I'm open to ideas from folks about that, because these are going to be located out in the middle of the woods, and you're adding a lot of infrastructure, often one way in and out road. So, maybe trying to get some ideas about how we be preventative about where we're putting housing. Review the road setbacks. Language to state that these developments may be located to adjacent loud land uses in the FAR 1 zone districts, so dog kennels and forestry activities that are permitted uses in FAR 1. We don't want to be creating land use conflicts. And then open space requirement will maintain the character of Cook County and avoid impacts to wetlands and streams. And then again, that overlay district, it allows communication about stricter land use regulations, so no vacation rentals or commercial activity. You would look on the county zoning map, if you're looking to buy one of these parcels, you'd see it's in that overlay district. You'd see in the zoning ordinance that it prohibits vacation rental. It'd be nice and clear to everyone, rather than like being stuck in the back of the platting documents or something. And then site-specific vetting through the rezone process, rather than changing the whole zone district. So, easier solution would be like, let's just get rid of the 10-acre minimum lot size for FAR 2 and make it all 5-acre minimum. That's just like a really heavy-handed way to create a lot of problems. So this is very site-specific. And then the green light early in the process for developers, again, giving them kind of that nod that, okay, well, let's move forward in this and really make this work. So,
A question on the language that states that they may be located next to loud land use uses.
yeah.
If I'm a developer and I'm looking for location, that may be a detriment.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say that if we found that we've used up all the quiet spaces, and so we're only left with loud land uses,
Mm-hmm.
then we're sort of, that's our choice. I mean, we have no other option.
Mm-hmm.
Given the fact that if I'm going to make an investment and I want to be able to have selling features, value added, it would seem, I don't know why that's necessarily in there. In other words, why have we put that in there when we have the option not to, which is more attractive to the person who says, I don't want to be located next to dog kennel?
I think it's about setting realistic expectations. So in the FAR 1 zone district, again, dog kennels are permitted use. That's a property right to everyone in FAR 1.
Right.
And we can't foresee when someone buys FAR 1 right next door to one of these developments, and they're going to start up their dog kennel, which they've got a right to do. That's a changed condition. Maybe they bought that land thinking it's going to be nice and quiet, and then there's dog kennels next door. I think it's right to give people a heads up that, these are located in more rural areas. That's the reason we don't have really tight density residential activity in the rural areas of Cook County.
Yeah.
Is because we have lots and lots of loud things out in the rural areas of Cook County. And so if we have a statement in there that sets reasonable expectations and communicates that in advance, when people come to our office and they complain, say, you're in this zone district, it's like a stated thing in the zone district that there's sometimes going to be loud things next to you.
Yeah.
And that's the trade-off for affordable rural development. So that's why I have that thought in there of trying to have something.
Yeah, I would agree with you from the standpoint, it's good to be upfront, so it's a known factor. And because the provision is in the law, in the ordinance, we can't control that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that obviously, and you're aware of this, that want to control what other people do, but don't want those controls on them.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
I would agree with that, just want to understand that.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Certainly, there's a gentleman who called me once who was really upset about a neighbor's dog kennel.
Yeah.
Dog kennel's in FAR 1. The neighbor bought land in FAR 1. He just didn't do his homework to see
Yeah.
what was allowable in FAR 1.
Yeah.
And so, try to avoid that where possible. Also, the design itself, like open space subdivision, you can put 15 acres of land between you and that next door private FAR 1 zone district. So the site design can occur in a way to try to mitigate those impacts and be thoughtful about them. But
Sure.
that's things that decision makers and the project proposer should really be thinking about before they're putting 15 private lots right next to a potential dog kennel
Right.
lot in the future. So,
I kind of like that sound at night, though, when they're
Yeah.
howling.
Well, I stepped out last night and my ears were ringing because there was no sound anywhere at all. And I don't know how many hundred are within earshot, but not a sound. And it's usually like that.
yeah, that's
So-
cool. And this is my,
Was
you
it
know,
coyotes?
this is my ending slide, I'm pretty darn sure. So final thoughts for Cook County's future needs. You know, we don't have what's a really thorough, comprehensive plan for Cook County. And that's something that I want to be, yet.
Yeah.
And I want to work with the board in the future to really get a big community input, really look at our challenges that we're going to have in the future and try to do what we can to get ahead of them. That's a long, arduous process. And I'm looking at trying to put something that we already kind of have some tools in place and get them going now while we work our way towards that comp plan. Because we've got an aging population, and, you know, there's a big push to have people age in place, age in your homes or age in a home in your community. So this could potentially create the home stock that type of demographic would feel attracted to move into and still be near their family and friends. Affordable starter homes, again, how do we get that home that families can afford to get into up here? We've got a lot of remote workers, so people can move up here and work remotely. I don't see our population going downwards anytime soon. And then, you know, how do we build community through this? And I think this would be a really nice tool because you're clustering these homes together still out in the woods. So if you're an aging person and you buy one of these homes, you still have neighbors near you, but you're still living out in the woods. You might not want to live in the city. So, you know, that's kind of the target that I want to sort of get to with some of this. So thanks for being so patient with me.
Well, thank you. This is a good starter conversation, really appreciate. And like you say, you'll be doing a PowerPoint later on for
Yep.
other details too as you progress.
Yes, yes.
Mr.
Yeah.
Gamble.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the thought that goes into it. Did you reference a similar development in Wisconsin?
No.
Oh.
I was just driving through Wisconsin, I had a lot of time, and so
Okay.
I saw some smoke,
So
and then
there
I was
wasn't
like,
a
ooh,
reference.
fire.
That would be, one of my questions is, so this concept, new to us is not necessarily new to somebody else.
Open space subdivisions aren't new. That's in our
That's
subdivision
correct.
ordinance, and
Yeah.
nobody really takes a lot of advantage of
Yeah,
them.
but it would be interesting to know how that has worked with what the intention is. And one specific in that is that when I looked at this initially, it's like, this seems to be driven by contractors, by developers.
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was my first
Sure.
take on it.
Sure.
Because of the efficiencies in cost savings, it's a whole lot easier for me to do this than it is da-da-da-da-da. But, so the question is, in the experience, when you ask somebody that's done this elsewhere and they've had that lived experience, has what we hoped for been realized, or has the cost benefit been built into the profitability? That's the question.
Sure.
Because one of the initial meetings we had in the county years ago on the housing issue was, I think there's some real profit to be made here. And I raised my hand, I said, affordable housing and profit are sort of in conflict. It needs to be balanced. So I would just say that if we can see demonstrated that the cost savings are realized and it doesn't end up being a profit mechanism, then I think we've accomplished what we want to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The profit mechanism, that's why I have those uses. So, you know, we could have approached this whole thing with just a very simple change to the open space subdivision. Just say 2 times open space subdivision anywhere, and that's it. And increase the density with that. But what kind of homes do you think would get built if we gave that provision to only those, you know, that broadly? I don't think we'd be seeing the type of homes built that I'm trying to work us towards. So that's why I further complicated it to add this overlay district. And I know it's a lot to explain to people and be sure people are understanding it, but it is trying to hit to that, to really give the developers a way, I keep saying the words, but make the numbers work. Like, I think people want housing up here, but they want it in smart locations. I think if builders can sit down and look at a project and they're going to make this same profit, quote unquote, by building out 15 residential lots as they would have with one,
Yeah.
you know, second home, I like to believe they're gonna work their way towards that.
Yeah, and I think the message that should be communicated, you know, because the calls that I get relative to this subject is, oh my goodness, we're gonna create more density in smaller whatever, and then we're gonna just have more overnight short-term rentals and all of this kind of stuff. And so you can understand why that mindset might exist, but it's a matter of saying, this is our intent, and everything that is beneath that, this is how we achieve that intent. I think people will appreciate that. So it
Yeah.
leaves those concerns that, oh my goodness. You know.
Yeah, really quickly, if I can add, when I brought this forward to the Planning Commission last week, a couple of things that they brought up. One Planning Commission member wanted more flexibility in the consideration for vacation rentals in this area because they see it as a way for someone to make money while they are living here. So they're like, well, why don't we do like a guest cabin on the lot that can be vacation rental? I really want to steer us away from that line of thinking
Very good.
because the more we be flexible. If you want the second cabin, get the CUP for the guest cabin and rent it out long-term. You'll get some income doing that. But, trying to use this profit thing off of, I just want one part in the county where someone can just live and not have to worry about being competitive with vacation rentals. Not that vacation rentals are the be-all, end-all that are driving our housing things, but I just want to take that off the table for this. So I guess that's one thing I'd like to be purist about.
And I find that graphic that you had of the conventional subdivision, where you have the rectangles, you have all of that, and then you have the same space, acreage, but then you have all this green space. And when you said, your numbers, I think, were really low when you were talking about the cost of a septic and a well, and with the well is if you get good water.
Yep.
And then the driveway and everything. So, you can invest $100,000 before you get to.
Yeah.
And you don't have a house yet.
No.
All you have is that infrastructure.
Right, so
Yeah.
more
I
than
think
the
it's
cost
a
of the
great
lot, usually.
solution.
It'd be good to find an example someplace that could be used to represent, here's an example, and here's what they experienced, to answer those questions that are, concerns, or the things, the assumptions we make based upon reasonable, analysis. But I think it'd be great to find a place where this has worked.
Sure.
Well, if you get a chance, you can drive up Mink Ranch Road.
Yep.
Okay?
That's a
Yep.
development that's been
Great
going on for
Yeah.
25 years.
I'm really
Talk to
leaning on
those-
that to
talk to
be
those
my
people, too, and have
example.
them-
Yeah.
And the
Testimony.
builders, we have a couple builders in the county that have been doing the building there. You could visit with them, too.
So I've had a chance to go to Mink Ranch. I actually looked at one of the homes for myself as a resident, and one of the things I really appreciated is green space in front. I could look out my back window, green space back there, look off to the side, green space. It was incredible for having neighbors close by. And I just think this is a really great tool. We've talked about it in the HRA for 3 years, and I really commend you for the work and kind of moving this vision forward.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, the only, I think, to everyone's, I thought it was clear that vacation rentals will not be allowed, but I think can't be overstated.
Right.
Also, as I was reviewing materials initially, I was thinking, much like you said, oh, this is just gonna be everywhere, FAR 3, FAR 2, but it's upon application for it. And I think that should really be put right out in front.
Have to
too,
meet our
just because
criteria.
It's not,
Yeah.
it's not, well, you have to apply, right? It's not just like, oh, I own FAR 3 and now it's in the overlay district. No, if I wanted to, I could apply for it, and then maybe it would if it meets the criteria.
And, not every lot will work.
Right.
There's so many barriers with wetlands.
Wildwood Acres is another example. That's been an ongoing project. Little places tucked off in the woods and, developing areas there that, it's a mix. There's some rentals and there's some people that actually live there and do things like Red Jarvis.
Yep, and that is the overlay district I mentioned earlier.
Overlay, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to a lot of more information and definitely, the public hearing and getting the word out to everybody about this. Both maybe township area too, that I encourage. I'll be going to Lutzen tonight.
Okay.
So I'll just encourage people to put their antenna up.
Yeah.
This is coming.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Just
Thank you.
excellent work, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the rest of the information, we have minutes of the standing committees of the airport, the budget and facilities, the building committee, highway advisory committee, and personnel committees. So when you have time, make sure you read through that, catch up with all that info. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
That's good stuff, huh?
Yeah, really, I was telling everybody.
Chris Skidlin is a builder up there.
Yeah.
He's done, I think, at least 3 homes.
I looked at the one of Skillet's.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Very
the thing
nicely
about
done.